Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. If you have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit us at www.crosswindchurch.net, or you can email us at info@crosswindchurch.net.
Well, good morning, everybody. Before we get started, I want to make one other quick announcement, something that I'm super pumped about. If you have been around Crosswind for about a year, you know what I'm getting ready to say. If you are new to Crosswind within the last year, let me tell you, something really cool is about to happen. We are 3 weeks away from Be Rich. And if you don't know what that means, we want to have a community. We want to be a church that our community is thankful that we're here. One of the questions we always ask is, if our church were to cease to exist, would our community miss us? And Be Rich is an opportunity for us to kind of refocus on that and to unleash a wave of generosity out into our community. We're going to give some money away. We're going to serve some. We're going to love on some folks. We're going to raise a bunch of food for backpack programs. And during 3 weeks in November, and I couldn't be more fired up about it. It's coming. It's coming. I just want you to be aware. Now, if you're a guest with this, is your first time here, let me tell you how we do things at Crosswind Church. We pick a topic, and then we talk about it until we're done talking about it, and then we pick another topic, we kind of move on. And so today, we are in week 2 of a sermon series we've been doing called The Hunt, with this creepy kind of crawly bumper video that you guys have watched now for a couple weeks, and I've gotten hate email and stuff like that about it, but it's okay. I wanted you guys to be aware of something before we get started. I mentioned this last week, but there is an analogy we're going to keep coming back to over and over and over again in this sermon series. It's an analogy that I did not make up, but a guy by the name of Carlos Whitaker wrote a book called Kill the Spider. And in that, he breaks forth this analogy of spiders and webs. Now, he calls them cobwebs. I have a hard time calling them cobwebs because they're not cobwebs, they're spider webs. But that's just because I'm an Enneagram 1 and a little bit obsessive compulsive. So, regardless of that, he lays out this analogy, and it's going to guide us through the rest of the series. Let me tell you kind of what it is that he says. He says, a spider is an agreement that you made with a lie. So if you've been to a therapist, they may have said there's a core belief that you have, there's a lie that's in there. A spider is an agreement you've made with a lie, and a web is anything that you use to medicate or to numb the feelings that come from that lie. So what we said about medicators last week was there's any number of things that can kind of fit into that gap. Often we go to things like drugs and alcohol, and that's true, those can be medicators, but it could even be something that's socially acceptable, like sleeping all the time, or shopping, or eating, or not eating. Like, there's all sorts of things that we can do to kind of help us escape the feelings that we feel when we buy into or we believe a lie that's been told to us. And last week, just to catch you up, what we said was that the father of all lies, all of these lies, they don't just come out of thin air, they come from Satan himself, our enemy. Jesus said that he's the father of lies. When he speaks lies, he's speaking his native language. He's been lying from the beginning. He's been telling us all sorts of lies, whispering them into our ears. And when we agree with one, or when we say, yes, that's one of them, then a little spider is born in our hearts. We start to medicate, and we start to spin webs. And so what I've invited you to do in this series, what we're continuing today, is to ask you to go on a spider hunt with me. Go on a hunt where we not just clean out the cobwebs, and there's times where we need to clean out the webs. We don't just do behavior modification, and yet we certainly do need to do behavior modification. But what we need to do is we need to dig down deep, ask some really hard questions, get a little bit uncomfortable, and see if we can't figure out where the lie is that we have bought into. Now, one of the things that I said last week that I think is going to kind of help us in the next couple weeks is I said there's 2 families of lies that Satan tells us. There's probably more, but we're going to deal with 2 of them in this series. There's lies that Satan tells us about God, and there's lies that Satan tells us about ourselves. And for some of you that are here today, those lies that he's told us about God and about ourselves, they're the reason why you've struggled with religion. That's the reason why you struggled with Christianity. That may be the reason why you push away from God or from anyone that wants to talk to you about God. It's because somewhere along the line you bought into some kind of lie. And so, if you're here today and you're far from God, or you're here today and you don't have a relationship with Jesus, I'm so glad that you're here. Because as we go to battle against those lies about God, we're going to try to shine the light of truth into those dark places and show you what exactly is the truth about God. Now, growing up, there was one man that just had a great influence on my life. Obviously, my father had a great influence on my life, but my grandpa, you've heard me talk about my grandpa all the time. He's one of these men that just had this tremendous influence on who I became. He helped me figure out how to hammer a nail. He was big into woodworking, so he gave me a hammer and nail long before he should have given me a hammer and a nail. He taught me how to play baseball, countless hours out in the backyard, hitting me fly balls so that I could become the best outfielder that I could possibly be, and throwing me pitch after pitch after pitch, and it didn't matter because I didn't have any power, and I was never a good hitter. But anyway, regardless of that, he taught me all those things. He used to play the guitar. He and I would play the guitar together. And he only knew one chord progression, and we would just sit in his living room. He would just play that chord progression over and over again. I would play with him as long as he wanted to, because he was my grandpa, and he just had this tremendous influence on my life. But especially as grandpa got a little bit older, and of course, for me, he was always just a little bit older, he developed these conspiracy theories. Like maybe you're one of those people that believe conspiracy theories, right? Whether it's aliens or UFOs or whatever it is. But he had these conspiracy theories. And when I think back now at the conspiracy theories that my grandpa held on to, as a little boy, they seemed like such a big deal. But now when I look back on them, I'm going, why in the world? Like, Grandpa, it's the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life. So like he had these conspiracy theories about things that just didn't really matter. Like he would tell you these stories, and he would outlay these theories. And the way that he kind of did it, the way his personality was, is as he got to the end of his theory, kind of spinning the last sentence, his voice would kind of raise a little bit, and he'd kind of lean forward. That was how he did it. So he had this theory about light bulbs, and he would light bulbs, right? And Grandpa would say, Jeremy, I need you to understand that scientists has already figured out how to build a light bulb and make a light bulb that will never burn out. But do you know why we can't have them in the stores? Why, Grandpa? Because the government won't let us. And he kind of leaned forward and screamed that last little bit at me. Government won't let us. And like as a 10-year-old, I'm like, whoa, the government's holding out on us. You know, but as an adult, I kind of like, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense, Grandpa, at all. He had the same theory about batteries. I don't know if he was just tired of changing his batteries into remote control or something along those lines, but he would go, you know what, I'm convinced that scientists have already figured out how to get a battery that will never go dead. It will just never go dead. But do you know why we can't have it? Because the government won't let us. And he would just get, there's this constant kind of stream of things. He had this idea somewhere, and I don't know if he believed it or if he was just trying to lead me on. Like, I don't know, as a 10 or 11-year-old, my grandpa was in the Navy. He must know everything, right? And so, like he had this idea that the government, or he planted this idea inside of me, there were people that had something that they were holding out on us. They had some kind of resource that they didn't want to give us because maybe we weren't ready, maybe it would cost too much money or whatever it was, but there was technology there were resources there, and they were holding out on us. Now maybe you've experienced this in your own home, right? Like your wife looks at you and she goes, I'm sorry, honey, all of the Nutter Butters are gone. You think she's got some stashed away, right? Like a little Ziploc somewhere, right? Or he says, listen, we can't go out to eat today. We don't have any money. But on Monday, you call him and ask him where he was, and he's at Wendy's. And you're like, hang on a minute. I didn't think he got maybe a little bit of extra, and he's holding out on me. Here's why this is so important, because I think this is one of the big lies that Satan whispers in our ear about God. He tells us that God is simply holding out on us. That God is all powerful, and God has all of these resources. But for whatever reason, God isn't giving them to us. He is holding out on us. You want to know what makes this lie so dangerous? Is that if we were to pause and think about it, like on some level, some very carnal level in our hearts, it's kind of plausible, right? We kind of get it. And the reason that we kind of get it is because there have been things that I prayed for, things that you prayed for that haven't come through. But even some good things, right? Like you heard that God was a great physician. You prayed that someone would be healed. You prayed that someone would live. And then they didn't. And you're left to kind of go, well, either God isn't all that powerful, or He is that powerful and He's just holding out on me for some reason. And maybe that's why you pushed away. Maybe that's why you pushed back. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's you heard that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and He's infinitely wealthy, right? And you can't find a job that you can make enough money to pay for your bills and keep your family making ends meet, right? And you pray that He would give you the job. You'd be happy with just a cow. and it doesn't come through. And you're left to wonder if He really cares about you, or if He's just kind of holding out on you. Or you heard that God was a reconciler of relationship, and you saw her spending more time at the office, and you saw His eyes dart at the other woman in the grocery store. You felt your marriage drifting apart from one another, and you prayed that God would restore it. And He left anyway. She left anyway. And when we find ourselves in those moments, Satan bends down and he whispers in our ear, God doesn't want good things for you. God's just holding out on you. God doesn't care. God isn't powerful. He whispers those lies inside of us, and a little spider is born in our heart, and soon we begin to medicate. We begin to spin web. We stop engaging in providential relationships where there's other people that can point us to God. We stop attending church. We stop spending time with God. We stop praying. We go and we numb ourselves on our cell phones or through TV or through media or whatever it may be. And before we realize it, we are caught in a tangled web that the spider that's birthed in our heart weaves. And so the way we battle these lies, we learned last week, is we shine the spotlight of truth on them. And so today, I want to shine the spotlight of truth from a letter that was written by a guy named Paul. Let me tell you why it's important that we're reading a letter from Paul. Paul was first Saul. He hated Christians. When he first comes on the scene, he wanted to destroy Christianity, stamp it out. He, in fact, had gotten some permission from some powers that be to go into another city to persecute Christians, have them thrown in jail, arrested, beaten, in some cases executed. He wanted to stamp out this movement that was called the Way, that we know as Christianity. And then along the way, he has this encounter with Jesus, and his entire life is changed. And he takes that same zeal, that same fervor, and he now starts to use it on behalf of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he goes and he plants little churches, little ecclesias, little groups of believers all over the Mediterranean rim. And the way he stayed in touch with them is he continued to write letters to them to keep in touch. And those letters make up about half of our New Testament today. Some of the churches he planted, some of the churches he had been to, some he hadn't been to. This letter that we're going to read from today was written to a church in Rome, and Paul hadn't yet been there, although he wanted to go. And Rome, the letter of Romans is an incredibly rich theological letter that Paul writes explaining the implications of the gospel. This is what the gospel is. This is what God did on your behalf. And this is how God is taking Jew and Gentile, two nations, and fusing them together in one. This is how God can change your life. That's the message of the book of Romans. And as we make our way towards Romans chapter 8, he pauses. And it's as if Paul understood that 2,000 years later in the church in Union City, we're going to be wrestling with some of the lies that Satan is telling us. Maybe it's because he's been telling these lies all along. Paul just wants to shed some truth, shed some light on these lies that Satan is telling. So we're going to be in the letter to the church in Rome. It's called Romans. And we're going to be in chapter 8. And we're going to begin in verse 31. If you want to follow along on your own Bible, you can turn there or on your smartphone or whatever. Otherwise, we'll put all the words on the screen. This is what Paul says in Romans 8, chapter 31. What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? Now, these things he's talking about are the gospel. That all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That the salvation comes from Christ alone, through faith in Christ alone, through the grace that he's poured out on us. That God is at work reconciling people to himself. If that is true, what are we going to say in response to this? And then he makes this statement. It's a statement that we find on t-shirts and coffee mugs and Thomas Kincaid paintings all over the place. If God is for us, then who can be against us? Let me tell you why that's kind of an interesting deal for me. See, growing up, the people that I wanted the approval of more than anybody else were my mom and my dad. In fact, if you have kids, probably they want your approval more than anybody else. The studies kind of show, right? And I felt, especially in high school and college, that if mom and dad were on my side, if mom and dad were supporting me, if mom and dad were backing me, then it really didn't matter what else anybody said. It really didn't matter what else came my way. I could stand up under any attack that anybody might dish out on me because my mama and my daddy, they had my back. Now here's what Paul wants you to understand, what I want us to wrap our heads around today. The God that created the heavens and the earth, The God that hung the stars in the sky knows each one of them, by the way. The God that knows every hair on your head and was powerful enough to tell the sea you can only come so far. Paul says that God has your back. That God is for you. And if He is for you, there is nothing that can stand against you. Now, that sounds great. And you bought the coffee mug. Somewhere, if we were to get real honest, somewhere deep down, there's this spider that's spinning, that's saying, how do I know? But how do I know He's for me? Jeremy, that verse sounds great, but it doesn't feel like He's with me. In fact, you may even go this far. Yeah, I know God is for her. I know God is for him, but God certainly can't be for me. And the spider just spins his web. It's as if Paul understands that you're going to need to know how we know God is for us. And he tells us in the very next verse, verse 32, he said this, He who did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how will He not also, along with Him, graciously give us all things? When we first started going to the Andes Mountains in Ecuador, it's a terrifying ride up the mountain. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But we were completely disconnected from everybody else back in the United States. There was no cell phone signal. There was no internet at the time. There was no phone lines up there. We were cut off. And for 5 nights, we would go and we would camp in tents, and we just couldn't communicate with anybody else. And there was some positives to that. But the negative that I had is I was cut off from my 3 girls, from Jody and Emma and Abby. I could not see them. I could not interact with them. I was completely cut off. And let me tell you why that was kind of a big deal for me. About day 3, your mind starts kind of spinning, especially if you're wired like me. And you start kind of creating these stories in your mind, like, well, surely maybe one of them gets sick and they've gone to the doctor, or maybe they're in the hospital right now battling some kind of crazy pneumonia that comes from some kind of third world fungus or whatever it may be. And maybe Jody has had a car wreck, right? And they don't know how to get in touch with me. Or maybe something has happened to Jody and my girls are stuck in the house by themselves, and Emma's having to cook Easy Mac so that Abby has something to eat, and somebody needs to go check on the girls, and there was nothing I could do to get any kind of relief from that. And here's the thing that it dawned on me in that moment. I care so much about what happens to my girls that I would do anything, move heaven and earth, in order to keep them from experiencing harm and suffering, right? Like, that's one of those things that just, I think, is naturally kind of weaved into us as parents. Like we care so much about our children. If you don't have kids, then maybe it's a grandchild, maybe it's a niece, maybe it's a nephew, maybe it's a mom or a dad or an aunt or an uncle. There's individuals in your life that you go, listen, I care so much about them. I can't imagine, I can't fathom something bad happening to them. Now watch. Paul says that God loves you so much, that God is for you so much, that He didn't spare His own Son. Meaning, He took His Son, who He loved, and He sent Him to earth to die. Not just to die, but die on a cross. Roman cross. We get the word excruciating from 2 little words, ex and crucis, out of the cross. The pain was tremendous. You've heard the story, seen the movies, I'm sure. God is so for you. He would be willing to sacrifice His Son so that you and He could have a relationship again. This is a big deal. You want to know how God is for you? Want to know how God is for you? Here's what Paul says. Look at the cross. Look at the cross. That is how you know that God is for you. He goes on to tell us that if He has given up His Son, how do you not believe that He also won't give you all good things graciously? Now, this can be misunderstood because all good things we can define as all good things, right? Like we can say that means He's going to give me a car and a house and make me healthy, wealthy, wise, and beautiful. Aside from like present company. That's just not going to happen, right? What he's saying is this. The same root word for grace is the same word that shows up in this little phrase. The idea is, if God is willing to sacrifice His Son, will He not also satisfy your eternity? Will He not also set your security your eternity secure in Jesus Christ. Does that make sense? Meaning that He died for you. He has set you up forever. It's His child in relationship with Him. We may put it this way. If God is willing to sacrifice His Son, He is going to complete that which He has promised. You with me? Now here's where we get kind of we kind of let the lies kind of get to us again. Earlier this year, we kind of sat down as a family and kind of evaluated what we had done this year. It's been a very big year in Powell. So Emma got to go to Washington, D.C. with Union City Middle School, and we went to Chicago on my sabbatical, went to St. Louis on our sabbatical, spent a couple days in each of those places. Abby got to go and spend a week with grandparent in Nashville, and then we all, as a family, went to Honduras on a mission trip together. We traveled a lot this summer. It was a really, really eventful summer. Now, this was before my children knew that their grandmother was planning on taking them to the beach over fall break as well. When we were sitting down as a family, we were talking about it, and do you want to know what one of my daughters had the gall to say? It's so sad we didn't go to the beach this year. And I went, you've got to be kidding me. Here's what we had. Look, how many of your friends went to Honduras? How many friends went to Chicago or St. Louis, right? How many went to what? You've got to be kidding me. Like, you're looking at what it is you don't have rather than what it is that you do have. This is such a big deal for us because we find security in God through eternity, and yet we come to take it for granted because He doesn't give me what I want right now. And what Paul wants us to understand is that eternity is enough if He doesn't give me anything else this side of heaven, which, by the way, He gives you all the time. Eternity is enough. And if you want to know God is for you, He has secured your eternity through the sacrifice of His only Son. That's how much He cares about you. And Satan likes to bend down and whisper, God's just holding out. God's just holding out. But the truth is, God has sacrificed His best for you. He's given His best for you. Paul continues. Verse 33. Who will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? It is God who justifies. Who then is the one who condemns? No one. Christ Jesus, who died, more than that, who was raised to life, is at the right hand of God and is also interceding for us. This last fall, I kind of engaged in a guilty pleasure. I discovered something that I enjoy doing, which is a big deal for me. I found some podcasts on the podcast app, and they're podcasts that deal with like true crime, like unsolved mysteries and like cold cases. Right? And there's these investigative journalists that put all the pieces together, and I get to try to figure it out as I listen to each episode, and just one more episode before I go to bed, and just one more episode as I'm driving, and I just kind of binge out on all of these. And in all of these podcasts, there's almost always some kind of courtroom motif. There's a judge, there's a jury, there's a prosecuting attorney, there's a defense attorney, there's a defendant that's kind of sitting there. And what Paul is setting up for us is an analogy of a courtroom. He's setting up a courtroom scene for us in which God is the judge, Jesus is the defense attorney, Satan is the prosecuting attorney, and we're the defendant. And what Satan wants to do is he wants to bend down and whisper the lie in our ear that God is simply waiting for us to mess up so that He can get us. God is simply waiting for us to make a mistake so that He can prosecute us. Look what Paul has to say about that, right? He says, listen, who is going to condemn? Nobody. Who is the judge? It is only God who judges. And by the way, God has justified, meaning He has counted you not guilty. And here's why. He gives the reason why. Because it was Jesus, He said, who died. And more than died, He was raised to life and is now seated at the right hand of God the Father. Let's kind of whittle that down. He goes, listen, Jesus died to pay the debt that you owed for your sins so that you might be forgiven, counted as just, counted as righteous. And then Jesus rose from the dead to give you hope and the power over death. And now He is at a position of authority where He is continuing to work and intercede on our behalf. I like to think about it this way. Imagine a courtroom, that courtroom that I set up just a minute ago. And you're sitting at the defense table with Jesus beside you. And Satan stands up and he begins to hurl your past at you. By the way, doesn't he do this to you? Don't you remember? Every time you make a mistake, you know why it's so hard to let go? It's because Satan is whispering in your ear, God's got you. God's got you. He can't love you. Satan throws out accusation after accusation after accusation. I can just imagine in my little picture Jesus standing up and going, I object. I paid for that one. I object. I paid for that one. I object. That one is taken care of when I died on the cross and rose from the grave. There is therefore, he would say, now no condemnation for those who are found in Christ Jesus. He, God, made him, Jesus, sin, who knew no sin, to become sin on our behalf, that we might become the righteous of God. When God looks at us, he sees the righteousness of Christ, and he declares us not guilty. Here's the thing, Satan whispers in your ear, God's just waiting for you to mess up, so he can smite you, so he can get you, so he can punish you. Paul goes, the truth is, you have been declared just, forgiven, taken care of, because of the blood of Jesus Christ. He goes on. We'll move quickly. Verse 35. He says this, who then shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword, as it is written, for your sake we face death all day long, and we are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. Let me tell you why this is a big deal. Paul writes this after he's already experienced almost all of those things. He's experienced nakedness. He was once beaten, stripped of his clothes, and left for dead outside of the city. He's been shipwrecked. He's been without food. He's had plenty. He's been snake bitten. He's been thrown in jail. He's been persecuted and cussed at and slapped around. Paul has experienced every one of these circumstances. And in the middle of all that, he goes, listen, can any of those things separate me from God? Let me tell you why it's such a great question. Because somewhere along the line, we bought back into the temple model that the Old Testament Jews bought into. The temple model that Jews bought into was that if things are going good, God is blessing me. If things are going good, then I must be doing it right. If things are going bad, then I must have done something wrong. And we buy into that lie all the time. We revert back to the way things maybe used to be. And when our circumstances are less than ideal, when the money doesn't make it to the end of the month, when the relationship finally ends, when our children go off the rails, when we experience all those difficulties, it is so easy for us to say, well, I must have done something. God must have turned his back on me. God must have abandoned me. God must not be thinking of me. I've really done it this time. He has moved away from me. He's taken his love with him. So Paul asked the question. He goes, listen, what can separate us from God's love? Can any of these circumstances? Can any of these things? Look at the next verse. Verse 37, if I'm not mistaken. No, he says, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. This is how we know Paul is a theologian. In seminary, they teach us that if you don't have a word to describe what it is you're trying to describe, you should make one up. Paul made up this word, more than conquerors. It's a combination of words we don't see anywhere else. It means that you conquered and then conquered. Right? You conquered and you more than conquered. As a guy that likes to watch sports, I don't get it. Like, how do you win more? Like, you either win or you lose. Paul's going, I need you to understand, it's not just conquering, it's not just winning. You've over and above done more. You are more than a conqueror. Meaning that when Jesus loved you, when he poured out his love on you, it was not something he desires to take back. It's not something he will take back. You have received his love, and no matter what your circumstances are, those circumstances will not separate you from God's love. He goes on, just to make sure we get it, because this is a very, very big deal. Some of you need to memorize these two verses. Verse 38, for I am convinced, Paul says, that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Work through that with me real quick. Neither life nor death. Meaning that even in death, he has conquered death, and his love overpowers it. Neither angels nor demons, meaning nothing supernatural. Nothing that is maybe more powerful than us in the supernatural realm. Neither the present nor the future. I love this. Meaning not what I've done, not what I'm doing, or not what I will do. That's big. I don't know how it works. It is. Nor any powers. This is probably a reference to the pantheon of multiple gods that people were worshiping in the Roman Empire. Nor height, nor depth, or anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. See what Satan wants to do is Satan wants to whisper in your ear. What you've done means that God couldn't love you. What you've done in your circumstances demand that God has withdrawn from you. And Paul goes, the truth is this. There is nothing in this world or out of this world or ever in all creation that can separate you from God's love. No. You're more than a conqueror. Because you didn't do the conquering. Jesus did. Nothing can separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. He loves us. He is at work. And He is shining the light of truth on the lies that you have bought into. He's not holding out. He is giving His best. He's not waiting on you to mess up so He can smack you around. He has declared you as righteous and just. And your circumstances don't determine His love for you. He loves you in spite of where you've been. Here's the thing. When we're able to take the sword of truth and pierce it deep into the lie of that spider, we begin to live our lives with a different perspective. We begin to step into a freedom that our eternity is secure, and because our eternity is secure, my present circumstances don't matter. What's going on in my life in compared to eternity is but a dust that's blowing away. When we live our life in that reality, it changes things. This last Tuesday, some of you had an opportunity to go over at Second Baptist. The Latimer Foundation brought in a missionary named Carol Ward. She's a missionary to South Sudan, Uganda, over in Africa. And she had a tremendous talk that she gave over at Second Baptist where she talked about what it was like. She grew up in the Philippines in the jungle with her parents translating the Bible. She said it was so dangerous over there that they would call in, radio in every morning at 5 a.m., I think is when it was. That was a radio roll call. If you didn't answer at 5 a.m., that you were alive in the jungle somewhere on your CB radio at 5 p.m., you had till 5 p.m. to do that. If not, after 5 p.m., if you still didn't respond, they would send somebody to look for you to see if you were alive or dead. That was how dangerous it was where she was. And when she signed on to go into South Sudan, they were at war with each other, warring tribes, and the tribalism was just gigantic, and there was a lot of children being abducted to become child soldiers, and all this that was going on in South Sudan and Uganda, and she decided she was going to go. It was so neat, she couldn't find a missionary organization in the United States that would pay to send her over there, or that would even support her, or even pray for her. They said, no, we don't want to send you over there just so that we can pay to send you back in a body bag. No one goes there and comes back alive. I can't remember if she was the one that said it or if it was another missionary that she was talking to that said it. But she put it in perspective this way. She said this: my eternity is secure, and theirs is not. So I'm much more willing to risk my life for them than to sit home and play it safe. See, here's the thing. When we realize that our eternity is secure in Christ, that God is who He says He is, that God is for us, then all of a sudden, all of those enemies that stand against us pale in comparison to the love of God that He has in store for us. Let me tell you how this played out in my life. Gosh. I told you about the first time that I traveled up to the mountains in Ecuador. We were in the Andes Mountains. We crossed the peak at about 13,500 feet on a road. We go down to a little mission, not a mission village, a village where they sell stuff, a commercial village there called La Esperanza. That means the hope. And there, the bus couldn't take us any farther up to the mountain villages where we were going. So there, we would pay 50 cents a piece to ride on a chicken truck up the mountain. A chicken truck, like a pickup truck with the big high walls. and they put about 8 of us men from Alabama on the back of this chicken truck, and every Ecuadorian within a 30-mile radius was also on the truck. Like, they just piled on. It led to us coming up with the phrase, do you know how many Ecuadorians you can fit on a chicken truck? And the answer is 1 more. Right? They just kept adding them on. And so we're going up the side of the mountain, and the truck is kind of rocking a little bit. On this side, there is a cliff that just goes straight up. That's where we're going. On this side, there's a cliff that goes straight down. And I am riding on the side of the wall of the chicken truck, and here was my entire thought. I had a couple thoughts, but here was my first thought. It was, okay, if the truck tips over, where am I going to jump? That was all I could think about. And the next thing I thought was, when I die on this mountain hill, which is not like if I die, when I die, my wife can't come up here. Because she's going to be like all Elizabeth Elliot. Like, she's going to want to go and evangelize these people and save them all because her husband died here. That's just how Jody is. She's going to go do that. And I got to the village of Tawalo, and I walked into the village. I was never so thankful to be on somewhat flat ground. We're still in the mountains, but they had leveled out this area where this village was. And that night, we got into our tents. We were camping because we were so remote. I got into our tents, and I pulled out my journal. You can go read it. It's upstairs right now. And I wrote these words, "We cannot bring our wives here." It is so incredibly unsafe. And then I spent a week in the village. I came home and I told our church about it. And I looked at my wife, who was crying on the front row, and she won't be God. It's like, Jody, you don't understand. Chicken truck, mountain. She's like, we got to go. These people need to hear about Jesus. And if we don't take it, there's no missionaries up there. If we don't take it, no one will take it. Listen, our eternity is secure, she might have said. And theirs is not, and it's worth the risk. Some of you guys got bent out of shape when you heard that the airline flight into Tegucigalpa was a little rough. Your eternity in Christ is secure. Yours may not be. Why? When we start to realize how much God is for us and what it is He's done for us, when we wrap our heads around the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ and how it has changed our lives, let me tell you what it does. It causes us to live a life in perspective. That my eternity is secure. And though my circumstances may not be what they want, though I'm eating only rice and beans mixed with bugs because that's what's in it, that is enough because He has secured my eternity in Christ Jesus. And neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor demons, nor powers, nor heights, nor depth, nor anything in all of creation can keep me from the love of Jesus Christ who is in Christ Jesus. So take my life. For me to die is gain. Then, when we put to death those lies, then we come to understand what Jesus meant. He says, I want you to live life and to live it to the full. And live it for something that matters. Something more than what you get here on this earth. Something eternal. Last week we asked you 2 questions. First one was this. What is it that you're doing to numb the lies that your heart has believed? What are those medicators that you have? I even told you, if you don't know what they are, ask somebody that loves you. They probably do. And then I wanted to ask this really tough question. Why do I do those things, really? Not why do I do those things. We can come up with answers to justify them. Why do I do them, really? And when you did that, I told you, you might be able to catch a glimpse of a spider, of a lie. Today, I want to ask you the next level question. What are the lies that you believe about God? What are the lies that you believe about God? Is it that He's holding out on you? That He's just waiting to get you up when you do something wrong? That maybe your circumstances are a result of your disobedience or your lack of faith or whatever it may be? Maybe it's something else. What are the lies that you have believed about God? I want to tell you mine. It's a lie that I believe I put to death, but one that keeps trying to be rebirthed in my life. The lie that I believed about God was this. I believed that God wasn't enough. Now, I would have never said that out loud. I would have never even said that in my own head. But when I started whittling down and looking at my behavior and looking at my medicators, the reason that I did those things is because I feel like God wasn't enough. And so I'm worried all the time. I worried about the church, and I worried about my kids, and I worried about my wife, and I worried and worried and worried, and I became anxious, and I developed ulcers, and all sorts of other things that I worried. And do you want to know what worry essentially is? Worry is saying that God can't handle it. Worry is saying that God isn't enough. Worry is saying that I care about my kids more than God cares about my kids. Hogwash. Worry is saying that I care about this church more than God cares about this church. That's garbage. Right? And when you finally put to death that lie that God isn't enough, then you can step into His provision that is found in Jesus Christ and really experience the freedom that comes in truth sets you free. Then you know what Paul meant when he said, if God is for us, who can be against us? What are the lies that you have believed about God? We pray for you. God, we are undeserving of the grace that you poured out on us when you sent your Son, your only Son, to die, paying a penalty that we owed but couldn't pay. God, there are times when we even doubt your love for us, and I'm blown away when I just pause and look at the cross and realize what you did for my eternity, and realize what you did so that you could have a reconciled relationship with me. How much you sacrificed and how much you gave. You gave of your best. You're not holding anything out for me. But God, sometimes it's so difficult to put to death those lies that Satan whispers in our ear. Those lies that you're holding out, those lies that you're just trying to wait for us to mess up so you can get us and punish us, and our circumstances are actually signs of you withdrawing your love. God, it's so hard to put to death those spiders, those lies. And I pray that you would help us begin to do that even right now. Call to mind, to our hearts, those lies that we believed about you. Give us the truth of your word to put them to death. Help us to rest in the freedom that comes when we put our trust and faith in the sacrifice that Christ made on our behalf. God, we love you. We trust you. And it's uncomfortable and it's hard, so we need your help. We pray all of these things in the powerful name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you guys so much for coming this week. I'll see you next week for part 3.
Love's like